beached whale on the...
I'm thankful that God provides.
Professionals will be investing right now to help serve churches.
And let's talk about ministry, and let's talk about how we can serve God and do what God has us to do.
This is what we learned, successes and failures in COVID. This is part 2, so I wasn't in the part 1, so I have no idea what was said, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be the better session because of the guys next to me, certainly. So if you were in part 1, you could probably, when we open it up, you can ask questions that maybe weren't answered from the previous episode. We'd love to maybe take an attempt at answering that or providing our thoughts on that. But I'm Craig Lawson. I'm a program director here at Ironwood, and we did about 6 weeks at camp this summer during COVID. Not a single week was the same, and we'll probably get more into that. And we'll have the guys introduce themselves, and we'll kind of just get started here right away. So,
okay. I'm Steve Ransom, director of Pioneer Bible Camp in Northern Utah.
Northern Utah.
Scott Randolph from Camp Assurance, Georgetown, Illinois.
Willie Partin from the Wilds Christian Camp, North Carolina.
So we'll probably start with some successes since we don't want to start it off on the wrong foot here this morning. And so just with different successes, we'll start with Scott. Maybe a success that we can talk about or something that happened and you're like, hey, we'll probably do this again. Who knew COVID could actually bring better camp? Why did I never think of this? So any successes, Scott, that you want to address first?
One of the things that we're going to keep is we had to eat outside quite a bit more because for some reason COVID hates the great outdoors. And the kids liked it because in our dining hall, and I noticed this was true when we're all talking in the dining hall up the hill, as I talk to you, that increases the volume in the room, which means I have to talk louder so you can hear me. I had one director tell me I was nodding yes to all kinds of things coming from across the table, and I don't even know what they were saying. And the kids had the same thing that happens in our dining hall, but outside, sitting around a picnic table, that volume can go somewhere, and so they were able to have better communication around the table. They enjoyed that. They liked eating outside. God thankfully gave us a fairly moderate summer. And then the other thing that we think was a success financially, we have always done family-style meals, and so we had to have enough food to put in all the bowls, enough drink to put in all the pitchers for all the tables, which produced a lot of very expensive garbage. And because I don't care what you say, the kids aren't going to eat their peas, but we have to put peas out on every table. We have to, do some of those things, and then you refill, and sometimes you refill too much, whatever. And so by having the kids come, we brought them in a different door. They stayed 5 feet apart as they were in line. And then when they hit the line, they were looking at our kitchen staff through plexiglass. Some of our kitchen staff was about 50-50. Some like the face shields, some like the masks. And they would attempt to communicate, but sometimes it was pointing because through the plexiglass, through the mask, through the face shield, it was hard to hear. But the kids then pointed what they wanted. So if they weren't going to eat their peas, they didn't point at the peas. We didn't put it on the plate. We didn't have to make as many peas or other things. And then the one extra expense was all the plastic to put the individual desserts in and that kind of thing. But we think we saved probably as much as 10 to 15% on our food costs because of putting it on the plate as they went through. And they still got a family style feeling because we have everybody eat together with their cabin groups at their table. So we didn't really sacrifice the family feeling, but we think, save quite a little bit of money.
Yeah, this is a good topic for us to even dwell on for a little bit. Any adjustments that you made to your dining room, your food service, guys, as you kind of trudged through what your county or governor decided was appropriate? Anything that you guys adjusted that worked well, or that I don't ever want to try this again?
Yeah, that was one of our first things we had. We thought, okay, how do we handle food service? And what about kids sleeping overnight? We sleep 8 people in a bunkhouse, 12 by 16 cabin, and so you can't maintain separation in that small of a bunkhouse. So we decided we would go with day camps. They would come at 9 in the morning, leave at 4 in the afternoon. For food service, we just served pizza.
That sounds so good.
Yeah,
I love pizza.
kids love it, and then a few other, prepackaged.
What are you
little
trying to
things
say?
of
I'm a
chips.
kid?
I love it too.
Oh, good.
So yeah, it changed our whole menu there, but yeah, having the short days, we first of all though canceled the whole month of June, and in Utah, one nice thing, it's our governor's been very cooperative. There is one large church. If I mentioned its name, you would all recognize it. But they have hundreds of camps all over northern Utah. Because of that, our governor is very favorable towards churches and camps, and that kind of helped us out with restrictions. But still, with everything being said, in May we said, okay, we're not going to be able to have camp at all, so we canceled everything. And then some kind of funny math took place where one of our guys started saying, if we don't do any camp, we'll actually be in better financial shape by the end of the summer than if we do a little. But we decided to go ahead and do some camps. I might share why later on, but for July and August we did some camps, just day camps, and it was great.
And Willie, did you guys switch up anything on
Food service.
food service?
We
He mentioned cabins, and we'll
Yeah.
jump into housing here in a little bit. But for food service,
We did adjust some things, but we're probably not going to. I would say there were successes, but we're not going to keep them. And we're trying to get back to normal as soon as possible. But I think one of the things is, people are cleaner now. I mean, even junior campers, they're washing their hands more. They're using sanitation, and that's a great thing.
It's a wonderful thing.
I don't know that I would have said, hey, let's go through this so we can get to this, but I'm glad that is the case. So that's a success. We had to adjust, obviously, like everybody else, as far as we went to serving the food, which is something we haven't done before. So if there's any kind of a buffet at all, we'd have to serve the food. We did just this past weekend release it so they can serve themselves but use gloves. So we're going for that. But as far as food service, we made those adjustments that had to be made to be able to accommodate the recommendations.
I think as a whole, food service was. It's a hard thing that you change something to do more, and you're like, we're going to keep that. So as a whole, I think most camps, whatever we did in food service, turned out to be something like, please, normal. Like, can we please get back to normal? I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to do this. So for kids, we still pass the plate through staff, and they kind of like old school lunchroom cafeteria. The lunch lady slops good thing we have good food and not slop, I guess. But they put it on, they portion control there, and they're able to come back up multiple times. But it's not, we prefer campers going through the line, getting the food that they'd like, however much that they would like. And so it's something they're like, we can't wait to get back to normal. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing we did inside the dining hall, we had to limit the number of kids we could have, and so rather than have them sitting at the 8-foot tables on both sides, we would slap 2 of those together so that they had roughly 5.5 feet, that's pretty close to 6, for the social distancing, and we could get 4 cabins in the main dining hall, and then we had enough room in a little back room that's kind of a lounge, but we could put a couple of tables in there as well. So we only allowed ourselves 2 guys' cabins and 3 ladies' cabins throughout the summer, and that fit when it was especially cold outside or raining or something, that way that we could still eat inside the dining hall. And then for what you said you did, when we had retreats now, we've had some fun with our governor, and so we always tell them they have to put a little squirt of Governor Pritzker joy juice on their hands to do that. And then if it is a buffet, put the glove on whatever they're going to pick up the handles of the spoons with. And we just copied my favorite place at Old Country Buffet, and that's or Golden Corral. That's how they did it in our area. Mm-hmm. So you stack the plate with the glove, and then all paper plates.
Okay.
That was another thing we did.
And then we mentioned, we've kind of mentioned 2 things that we can jump into. They kind of relate here, but it's the distancing as well as the housing. How do you handle that? I'll probably start because I know there was questions. This is feedback I got from part 1. Is Ironwood decided to be a day camp and then a rental facility. In essence, they rented a hotel room or a cabin, and that's how we divided. So we charged it different. It was two separate prices that they had a receipt. So we had a kind of proof that like, no, this is what we're doing. So a church was able to rent out a cabin, and it was we had those cabins. You couldn't be. California's law was you had to be of the same region, and we didn't know how to define region. Like, we're Southern California. Like, we didn't really know how to define region, so we defined it as counties. And so you weren't allowed to be in a cabin unless you were in the same county or the same church. And then even then, since we have bunk beds, you couldn't share a bunk bed with somebody that was from a different group. So you might be in a cabin with a different group, but you wouldn't be able to share a bunk bed with somebody that was in a different group, even though you're in the same county. So that's kind of, California said regions there. California didn't say anything about day camps operating. And then even in day camps, they didn't restrict day camps in their service of food. And so we still did some of the things where our staff went through on the other side of the buffet, and we extended meals longer because you just can't get through kids eating there. And then kids ate with their cabins at tables, so they were at the cabin with their table. And then all of our activities are outside, so that's how they socially distanced. So at the end of the day, we said, all right, day camp's over. We actually had to say this. Day camp's over. You can go find your sponsor or your counselor, and you can then go back to your cabin, and day camp will start in the morning at breakfast. So churches were able to hire a temporary church sponsor. So that was a counselor. They could hire a counselor, and then they would get a discount back in hiring. So the kid or the church never paid more for camp. It just so happened that cabin rental fee and what camp costs and what you're going to hire that temporary church sponsor as turned out to be the normal price of camp. So that we kind of it was a little bit of back end work for us. But it allowed churches to say, yes, we want to do this, and they were able to do that. On the flip side, the success of that, I'm a youth leader at my church. Normally we don't put a whole church in a cabin together that has drama waiting to happen. But this year, since they'd spent 4 months not being able to meet, it was absolutely amazing. So I'm looking back going, I think I want to do that every year. And every sponsor that we heard from was, thank you so much for being flexible to have our whole group in a cabin. It was the first time we've been able to hang out together and have fun. And I'm pretty sure some of those cabins that their sponsors were their counselors, they didn't go to bed when we say lights out were. I'm sure they did pranks and other things but they certainly had fun. And as long as I don't hear about it, great type of a thing. So anything that I know that we're a bit unique in how we did that. So we divided a number of things up there. But how did you guys handle distancing as well as housing there?
Well, for us, it was almost as if, because camping in our area is there's hundreds of camps, and they charge $1,500 a week. It's $1 billion industry in our area. So I think the governor was trying to say yes to camp without putting a stamp of approval on anything. So there was provision, even in the executive order. The one that this is just the Lord, because when that one executive order came out, as we were waiting to hear what was going to happen with overnight camps, he put in the executive order, it was all mass gathering numbers, and it was 10. We're like, okay, we're done. There's no way. We don't have that many facilities that can house, it doesn't even work. So we're like done. And then, so I was talking to one of our guys, one of the other guys was kind of heading up some of the, procedural stuff. And I'm like, well, it looks like we're done. He goes, wait, did you see section 6? And I said, what? So I went back and read section 6, and it said, all of this applies except for and then it said this is the Lord. He said, all of this applies except for those who are in section 10. Of course, section 10. And we're going through, and it said overnight camps. And it said the provision will be made there in other ways. And so in essence, going through the overnight camping stuff, they said we could cohort. And we're like, okay, what's the cohort? And they said, well, you can choose your size of your cohort. So all of these provisions came about that really enabled us to have camp. And really the barrier for the number wise was the capacity number in our dining hall. So we did that, but we were still keeping we were doing all the regulations and as many of the recommendations as we thought was feasible in our context. So we had cohorts. They were 50 size of 50, and all we had to do was quarantine that social distance that cohort from another cohort. So we did that within. And I can't wait to get this file of COVID and light a match to it, because I don't want to ever go back to some of this, obviously. But we had to zone off different areas of camp, and so cohorts at a certain time switched zones. So that's kind of how we handled the social distancing aspect, because the cohort didn't have to social distance. They could do whatever. They were just sizes of 50s. I don't know that was the intent of the governor, but he didn't say. So we did that, and
He had no intent.
no, actually, I don't think he did. I think he was like, we'll talk about something else. So,
Yeah.
So that's what we did, and that's how we handled the social distancing aspect. We did adjust our philosophy as well, is to not have the same church. A certain number was allowed from each church to be in a certain cabin. So we did adjust that because they came on buses together. So churches stayed in cabins, and that turned out to be something, again, I'm not as fond of, because I almost kicked a group of 7th grade boys out of camp on Friday night after the service.
Yeah.
So,
Drama, always.
Oh, good. But yeah, the counselor almost quit. But so certain things like that. So that's kind of how we handled. So we did what we needed to do to be able to have the camp that we had. So sorry, it took a little bit extra.
No, you're good. Anything else? Did you guys do anything special for?
We just only put 5 to 6 in a cabin that usually get old 10 or 12. So
Okay.
and then I don't think anybody actually slept top and bottom on the same bunk bed. I think if he was on top, you were on bottom, and I didn't go look through to enforce that, but that was the philosophical statement. And
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, counselors always do what they're told.
They do. We train them well.
That's right.
In our state, at that time, you could have groups of up to 50 for any religious group gathering. And that's 50 or 60 is the most we could handle and still keep separation in our dining hall. So our day camps, we limited to that, and we did family camps later on. Of course, with family camps, the family is the cohort,
Yeah.
so they can do. We always divide our camp into two teams, the red and the blue team. And so one thing we did was provided the kids, as soon as they came and went through check-in, they were given a bandana and placed on a team. So very easy to get a red or a blue bandana. And the guideline said, if you can't maintain distancing, you have to have a face covering. And so that covered it for us there. We could do pretty much anything we wanted.
In our chapel, the first week, we put little spots on the floor to try to make sure everybody was 5 feet apart, and that was about as exciting as popping zits. And so the next week, we just did the thing that every church was doing, and so this cabin set, and then we had so much space before the next group, so that it was the equivalent of the empty pew that now has become so common.
Yeah, I think cohorts became like kind of a big term. We called them like little group bundles or little group gatherings. So we had little pods in the meeting hall of like, this is that cabin or that church could sit together and be that, because they are their own cohort in essence. So we'll kind of take a break right here from us. Any questions that you guys in the audience might have? We've kind of just covered 2 broad topics. We'll jump into some more successes and failures. But based on what was said, anything you guys like to ask or maybe define better? Yeah, right over here.
Just was curious, what did you guys do as far as like all camp activities? Did you just totally scrap those out, or did you figure out a way to kind of make it work with the cohorts?
We adjusted certain things, and I'm sure we didn't make our governor happy, but there were certain games that obviously we're not going to be sweating on each other. So Some of the open field games, here the last few tweakages, they, board games played out on a field like Stratego or that kind of thing where you could still maintain some distance, and we did that. We did not do our group initiatives course because I didn't know how you could do that without, being all over everybody, getting over the wall or doing those kinds of things. And we got rid of what we call pygmy dodgeball and everybody else calls gaga ball. And that was a tough one because the kids, they're in that all the time. But we just got rid of those two things for this summer.
For 50 years, we've played big ball on Monday nights, and that's been a staple. And I tried to bring up a number of years ago with Rand in the room, hey, let's try something else, and I thought I was going to get fired. But
Instead, he left.
There you go.
Or you can go play big ball. So for the first time in 50 years, we could not play big ball. So, but again, the provision of being 50s, we were still able to play a lot of the staple games. But you had if any game that we could play with the group of 50, we could play. So that's kind of how we adjusted.
Yeah, doing just day camps, we our question we ask ourselves, how can we cram a whole week of camp into one day? Because we wanted the kids to have that experience. And we still wanted at least one chapel session and a devotion, cabin devotions time. But yeah, some of our games we had to eliminate those games where kids have to be close together, and we just gave the assignment to our program people, pick out some games that spread people out more. And they came up with a great obstacle course on the field that everybody lived through. It was amazing to watch. No broken bones, and it worked great.
We defined, so we kind of had a closed campus, so we weren't open to the public at all. And everything that we've read said that if you're in contact with it for like 15 minutes throughout the day, that's then what makes you close contact. So a game, you're not really in close contact with somebody for a full 15 minutes. So we operated pretty much as normal. And so a lot of this, you're going to hear a lot of different opinions. I didn't say this at the beginning. And it comes down to what you believe in your good conscience, what you would be allowed to do in those things. And so a lot of those things here at Ironwood, we kind of said, we're going to follow Mr. Sam's lead, and that burden is certainly on him. You guys, Willie, you're not the director, but you are in a higher role, so you might be able to, but you guys are the directors, so that goes on you. I didn't have really much of that weight at all. If I disagreed with Mr. Sam, I would certainly go up and say, this is a bad decision. And he would either say, nah, this is what we're going to do because of this, this, and this. And he would reassure, or he'd provide answers to the questions that we would bring forward. But we, with the big games, we pretty much operated as normal. Now, most of our games aren't let's hold hands and let's do spoke tackle or anything like that. We are spread out on a field. You only have like at most 2 people within the 5 feet of you as you're playing capture the flag, actually actively trying to get away from other people. And so a variety of those is like this, you're going to have a 0.5 seconds of close contact with that person. It's not going to total up to 15 minutes throughout that day. So
The only activity we demanded masks, the people who manned our zip line, because their face is right here, putting on the harness or checking before they send them off. We made them wear masks. But other than that, the staff wore masks while the parents were bringing the kids in, and they wore masks on the closing night when they were taking them out. But once it was just who's going to be here for all week, there was no mask wearing. The one thing that we kind of had to enforce, and nobody griped, thankfully nobody griped because COVID was so new, we did not allow anybody who wasn't going to be in the cabin for the whole week to even walk in the cabin. So parents didn't get to, a few moms were upset they didn't get to make the bed for their primary boy, but, other than that, we were fine. And so then the counselor op staffer who was helping out that counselor, they were the only ones that would carry in the suitcases. Same at the end of the week, they're the only ones that could go in and carry it out.
for us, we didn't do masks because heat stroke is more of a danger, more of a consistent danger than the possibility of COVID. And so heat stroke is a real tangible thing out here. Now, I know you guys probably don't necessarily have the temperatures we do, but that was something that it just, our county had a little line at pretty much the end of every one of their, so Governor Newsom would say something, and then a day later the county would, then we're going to do this, or we're going to push back on this. And then at the end of it, there was pretty much a line that said, "Do what makes common sense," which opens up a bit of flexibility for you. So masks in 108, 110 degree weather in the middle of the desert, that doesn't make common sense. To have kids go through dehydration. Now, we certainly didn't, like if somebody was wearing a mask, there was no attention brought to that. It wasn't like, oh, you're wearing a mask. All right. We didn't do any of that. That's whether mom or dad told them they had to, or anything. We didn't really pressure masks. That was a personal decision. We didn't want people wearing masks to, we'll say, bully people not wearing masks, and also vice versa. So, any other questions? Did we answer yours?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah.
What was the public perception of your decision to either carry on with regulations or without?
That was one of the questions the Thursday before we opened that we worried about. What is the legal aspect? Can we open or not? Secondly, if we do open, what will our constituency think? And thirdly, what will the community around us think? And thankfully, we live a long way south of Chicago. And so our constituency was like, yeah, open. There was only about one church that wasn't sure if we should do that. But the folks around us were still going to restaurants that were open in opposition to what the governor said should happen. And they were still doing other things, and many of them were not only not wearing masks, they were ready to shoot anybody that tried to make them wear a mask. We had a very loud anti-mask people, and most of them were homeschoolers. And then on that Thursday before, I was getting a little nervous, and so was our board chairman. That's Elena's dad, by the way. And so we were thinking, should we open up on Monday? The staff had been in for a week and a half, and so we had a lawyer friend, and we sat down with her and 4 or 5 influential pastors and some board members. And the one board member who had voted against us opening, we had 2 guys vote against out of the 9. As we talked and as the lawyer explained that the governor of Illinois had 30 days of absolute authority to shut anything down he wanted to. But by April 17th, 18th, he literally had no authority, but he didn't want anybody to know that. So he kept pretending he had authority. And it came to a head the 3rd Thursday of May when he had to present his reasons to the United States Supreme Court why he had the authority to shut churches down. And about an hour before he had to have that in, he got on television and said, these aren't regulations, these are guidelines, which was a tacit admission that legally I got nothing. And so the lawyer explained this to us, explained how he was attempting then to have the different state departments write all kinds of guidelines to make it look official. So that answered the legal question, because everything about camp, it was all about day camp. There was one parenthesis that said no overnight camping. But at the top of the page it said guidelines. So he had no legal authority to keep us from operating. Our restaurants were operating. The state police didn't acknowledge that he had any authority to shut restaurants down, churches down, or anything like that. So our constituency was okay. Community, we believe, would be okay, although dependent upon which presidential candidate they voted for, they might have different opinions, and we may not have cared if certain ones had opinions. Anyway, and yet we didn't want to be negative or, like we're running this in your face or whatever. We want to be gracious about it. Our local Department of Public Health, we took all of our staff members and had them train them in the 2-hour certification for food service training, because it's the only thing I could think of that would give them a certificate that said they're trained for sanitizing. It's a sanitation certificate. And that way we could advertise that to the parents, and that I think helped them a little bit. Also, the local Department of Public Health didn't mind making a couple $100. And they worked with us. In fact, the head of that department we worked with well. One of our former staffers is one of the sanitarians that comes out and inspects us. And so we went on ahead and made the choice to do that, and we've had no repercussions that we know of from the community, certainly not from the churches. Now, a couple of churches didn't send kids this year that they might have otherwise. The other thing we found is that we did not get what we would call the bus kids, because the scholarship kids that churches send on their own scholarship basis. So it was pretty much the kids who normally come to Sunday school, that's who came to camp this summer. or they were returning kids. One church really appreciated the fact that they had to fill out everything online because that's how we did the extra paperwork and whatever, because the kids who they normally had to go out and get the parents to sign the paperwork, and then the church was supposed to pay for that, when they filled it out online, these poor people figured out how to pay for camp all on their own, and the church didn't have to pick up the bill, and so they particularly liked that. But we just had to figure out the guidelines versus the regulations, and I'll get one more of my points out. People for years have told me that I need professional help, and it's very well worth it to contact a lawyer when you're in this situation, because what people say and what it legally means often have no context. There's no connection with each other. And in our case, the governor was attempting to say a lot of things, full well knowing he did not have the legal authority to make the statements that he did, and no one backed up those statements except in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, for us, public appearance, I mean, you drove down the road. We don't have much on public, so I would probably define your question as how did churches respond? So we sent emails out to churches at the beginning. Hey, what do you think? And my wife in the back probably could detail some of those emails a little bit better than I can. But we kind of just communicated, hey, like we're planning on it, and we had churches let us know, probably every other day. When are you going to make a decision? I think we emailed out in April or early May, hey, we're going to make a decision by this. We communicated that to our summer staff on whether we're going to have camp or not. Kind of the similar, they were guidelines, but I remember sitting in a director's meeting and sitting down saying, like, do we have a legal standing on which if somebody sues us, like, we are doing something that we won't be, like, where are we at? And the answer would have been like, yeah, I mean, we are a camp, a day camp, a hotel, a restaurant, all of those are able to be open. There's no reason that we have to be closed, even if it is a guideline. And so we felt we had at least two legs to stand on, if not something to hold on to for stability. And so our public, I guess, was the churches, and some decided not to come, and some came. But I don't think we got any backlash. We certainly answered a lot of questions. So there's a couple churches that would have called, and Mr. Sam or myself would have talked them through why we made that decision. And they would have, their conscience was bothering them on, can we come, or like, you said you're open and we kind of respect what you do, like, why? Can you walk us through your biblical principles of this? And so we just communicated, and they were at ease. They did a little bit more. So that church sat outside for almost all week. They ended up coming in on like Thursday because sitting outside is not a good seat out there. And so a variety of different things that we ended up doing. The other thing is, I think if there was a public around us, as much as we care and we want to not hinder the gospel with our with a brass attitude or with just being uncaring, we want to do what God wants us to do, even if it does have persecution, what we're going to call persecution, added to that. We'll deal with a couple of frustrated people to do what God wants us to do, and we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine with that. And sometimes feelings are hurt when you do the right thing, and that's our job, is to follow what God has for us. Steve, did you have anything on public appearance?
I'm just thinking it'd be very hard to measure that, other than the parents. As soon as we said we're going to have day camps in July, we heard from a lot of parents. They said, thank you so much for having something. Our kids are so sick of being,
Yes.
Nothing to do, no place to go. And so at the same time, though, our registrations weren't coming in. And so now looking back at it, we're asking the question. Now our first day camp was a teen camp, and all the others after that were what we call the juniors, the 8 through 11-year-olds. That first teen camp, there were almost nobody registered, and so we said, what's the minimum number we'll actually, before we say, okay, there's only 3 people, we're not going to do it. And we decided that 15 campers was our minimum, and I think we ended up with 17, and everybody was so happy. For the sake of my staff, you know, we had, I don't know, we can get into that a little later on, but I'd do it over in a minute, you know, regardless of the number, just for the staff.
Yeah. Matt, you had a question?
On the public appearance, we wanted to be careful on what we posted on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So just being very intentional with what pictures were okay and intentionally taking pictures of food servers wearing masks. So just thinking through what goes publicly.
We put none on Facebook. We just didn't put anything.
We only posted about construction projects is pretty much all we posted throughout the spring.
It was very boring for a while.
Very boring.
So halfway through the summer, we started posting pictures, and Miss Beth did our pictures, and it was one kid doing one thing, one kid doing one thing, one kid doing one thing, and we just left everything else. We got other really good photos, we just didn't share them. So.
Yeah, we've got great photos to use. So we've had retreats throughout the winter, and we haven't posted anything. And we have, I won't say we have people berating us for photos, but every week we have, when are you going to post pictures? We're like, we're not. And we're not going to necessarily say we're trying to hide this. It's just, it's unwise from a business standpoint to say, hey, California, come look what we did, type of a thing. So we're not trying to hide what we do. Like the health department knows that we're operating. They can come out whenever they'd like, and we'd love to show them what we're doing. But it's not something that we're going to, you know, shout from the rooftops in defiance and rebellion. So. All right, any questions about what we've covered? We're going to jump into some more topics, and we'll have some more questions as well at the end.
I think
Anybody?
he had a question.
I was just going to say, in reference to what he mentioned earlier, and maybe something you're going to cover on check-in procedures that you changed or manipulated, because I know lines, you know, at certain camps, all the campers go into the gym, and then from there they're dismissed to their cabin, like changes in. And so maybe something you're planning to cover later, but
Yeah,
let's do check-in procedures.
I was planning on bringing up registration process here in a little bit, so because that's a big one. So, all right, Willie, did you have anything on your list that we haven't covered already?
Pretty much nailed it.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Got it.
I think the trust factor was big because there were two things. Being clear was one thing. Three things, and obedience. Churches want to know that we're obeying, and then safety. So we were hitting those three things, and the vast majority of our churches were saying, okay, that's good. And then so at that point they trusted us to be able to do. And then when they got here, I think they saw that we were trying to accomplish those goals. So
I would not have understood how much weight a church puts into a ministry that they use. And so us saying, hey, we're going to do that, I would not have imagined the amount of phone calls we got. Okay, take us through your thought process. Can you help? Like we're pastors and we're struggling with what to do, and they have 100, 200 church members who have opinions, and they're telling them what to do, and that pastor's trying to wade through all of that. And so we got calls from churches all throughout the West going, help me, I'm not going to necessarily make my decision based on what we talk about, but I do kind of want to know how did you come through this, Matt?
A question for Willie. When y'all had to close, was that an internal decision or was that something imposed from the county?
all internal. We had 3 weeks of camp. First 2 were golden. The third week, a couple churches brought COVID in. And they didn't know, not their fault, and it spread. So we called the health department and said, "This is what's going on out here," and they said, "Well, this is our advice, that you guys at least shut down." And we asked the question, "Could we open back up in a couple weeks?" And they're like, "You can. You're gonna close again." So no, it was for us. It was a decision. They did not come in and shut us down.
Steve, did you have anything left on your list? Successes and failures?
Well, you're going to get to some of those in a minute. So.
Okay, so registration. All right.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll just jump right into registration. Registration process, that is pretty much a bottleneck when it comes to camp. Everything else you can kind of spread out. So you guys that are here were in our way station building when you registered. That is pretty much a large donut. So there is offices all along the outside walls, and then there's a hallway, and then there's offices in the middle. And so what we did, we had them come in, and then they had to go all the way around. They had the long walk all the way around, and we had tape on the floor at 6 feet. And so those groups, so a cohort would sit in, and then you space things out. And then when the registration ladies were ready for the next cohort, somebody would say, all right, you're good to go over there. Their temperatures were all taken. They had to sign a waiver saying that they have not, been in close. I think you guys all signed the same waiver. And so temperature was taken. And then from there, they would get on a truck outside, and we'd take them down to their cabins with their luggage and things like that. So we, using that large hallway that goes on, how many yardage is it? It's big. So it's a lot of track to be able to hold a lot of people.
And it cooled them down because they were coming off of hot buses. So
Yes.
That gave them time to walk through the air conditioning and cool down
Yep.
before.
Some of you don't have to worry about that, but a bus that doesn't have AC and they've had the windows down, they're coming in and they're going to fail that test. So if there was a failed temperature, we gave them 10 minutes and cold water, took another one, and if there still was what we would call a failed temperature, we gave them some more time. Some of us take a lot longer to cool down than others, and so they sat in the air condition, and I think it was up to an hour that they could wait to make sure that their temperature did go down. It wasn't just the heat of outside. So that's how we handled it. Scott, we'll come over to you. Anything adjustments that you made?
We sent emails out to the parents, and they had to get a temperature check on Friday night and check off the answers on the sheet. The sheet had everything was on the left side, was also on the right, and so then on Monday morning, once again, they took a temperature check right before they left. And then when they got to camp, we took a temperature check again, and like you said, if they've been wrestling with their big brother in the back seat or whatever, we'd stick them in the craft shop, which has air conditioning, for 15 minutes. By the time they took the second temperature check, everybody had passed. And the nurse, we had a nurse that was just a little bit hyperactive about this whole COVID thing, because both of her parents were in medical facility and understood. In fact, her mom had had a number of people that had COVID around her, and so they were a little uptight about it, and we just let her set the pace. And for us, we were only checking in about 40 kids, so we could do that without too much time. But they'd hit the nurse's tent. They couldn't walk into a building until they'd been checked, and then after that, they would go through the rest of the process and drop off their snack shop money and that type of thing. That was pretty much our procedure, and then we tried to just have the temperature check like you guys did here for retreats and those kinds of things. They don't have to fill out something 3 days ahead, but our camp doctor said, I would like for you to have something 3 days in advance, the morning of, and when they arrive, so that you can show you have 3 temperature checks. There's nothing here that they've kept ice on the back of their throat or something on the bus ride in, so they would make it. So anyway, that's what we did.
Willie?
Our goal was to, if you've been to the wilds, we have a road that's about a quarter of a mile, and by the time they get to, there's an island when you first come in. By the time you get past the island, we wanted it to be as normal as possible. So our goal was to try to do all the screening before they actually hit registration. So they came in, and they actually have a circle around my house. So all the buses, everything went around my house, and we had sent them the registration form, the screening form. So they had to have that filled out. They handed it in, got on the bus, took all the temperatures, or the vehicles, whatever, took all the temperatures. And by the time they went back around and it got to the island, it was nothing was normal, but it was as normal as it possibly could from that point on. So then they go down and they hit the registration just like they always had. So.
Steve?
For us, registration has always been a pretty big process. The kids show up about 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon, and we have a loop through camp, and we have a wagon we call the people mover, and so the parents would drop their kids off, and they would go up to a table to register. And this year we said, okay, nobody gets out of the car except the camper who's staying, and so we did a drive-through registration, and we did a lot more online. We've always done the main registration online, or for 5 years or so. But we run a general store, and so if the kids what we a long time ago decided, okay, we don't want any problem with theft, so everybody turns in all their money when they show up, and they then have a credit system at the general store. Well, all of that this year we did online also. So if the kids want to do a leather craft, or buying snacks at the general store, or play airsoft, anything like that, it's all paid for, all registered before they ever got there. The one drawback of that is, for a lot of these parents, when they come and get on the people mover, go up with their kids to see where their cabin is, that's the only time they see camp. The way we're set up, we're on a mountainside, so they drop them off down in the field down below. Everything's hidden in the woods. Some parents come and they're happy. They say, "See you later, kids," and they just drop them off and go. But they have no idea what's up there in the woods. They never see any of the buildings, any of the facility or anything, unless we do the longer process. So we got to weigh that out for the future. But yeah, they would drive up. Two of the gals would be there with thermometers, check their temperature and everything like that. And it was very, very streamlined, very quick and smooth.
Yeah. Anything else on anybody's list? I have one thing left, and it has to do with schedules. We'll get to questions in just a second, but
I've got 3 things, but 2 of them I can put together. I made a mistake.
Oh no.
When I went to the board, executive board, and we lined out, this is our approach, this is what we're going to do as best as we can understand it right now. And the problem with COVID is, as soon as you made a decision, within 3 to 5 days, you could throw that in the trash and start all over again, because nobody knew what they were doing. And it was this way and that way and this way and that way, and who knows who really has authority, and where it's all about science, and yet you give us competing things that show you really don't know what you're doing, because if this is true, this can't be true, and yet you're telling us both of these are true. And so we had determined this is what we're going to do, and then I sat down. We only have 2 couples and 1 single fella, and so I said, okay, this is what the board has said. And I was met with what I wrongly took as somebody trying to spit back in my face, no, we need to do this, we need to do that. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I just had 9 guys who are all, twice your age, and from all, and this is, my problem was, and where I failed was, the guys on staff see each other regularly, and we talk a lot. So all guys understood pretty much what went into the executive board meeting. But we hadn't given a chance for the ladies to have a seat at the table and talk through, and as you might understand, I think they carried more fear because they have children, or they have friends' children that they're very worried about. Secondly, what Sam said yesterday, the concept that this is our family's livelihood. And if we can't open, if we have to cut staff, it's not like we have a lot of choice, okay? And so that fear did not have a chance to voice itself, and I needed to do something that's very, very difficult for me. I needed to shut up and listen and just let it come out. Because after it came out and after we talked through, everything settled down. But it's kind of like a boiler, and when you haven't had a chance to release the pressure, it just keeps building. So I needed to really involve all of the year-round staff, which in our case is 5, and let them do the talking, then go to the board, and then come back, and that way all of us have had a chance to have some say and make sure that what we thought was a good idea at least has had a chance to be discussed. So I blew it in that. Secondly, we have to have, and those of you who didn't get to operate, you have to do it next year, and if whatever requirements come under, you got to have absolutely honest communication with your staff, and that includes admitting to them something that nobody in the government was doing. I don't know. Because when you tell them we have to do these rules, these guidelines, the question is why, and the absolute honest answer was, I don't know. But people who make a lot more than I do, and a lot smarter than I am, say this is the kind of thing we need to do. So just be open and honest with them. And when we did that, and particularly after they knew that we were still thinking Thursday before we were going to open on Monday that we might close, when I came back from that meeting with the lawyer and said, nope, we're going forward, there was tremendous relief, great thanks for prayers being answered, and it brought a commitment of our staff that we will put up with any stupid thing you tell us. We don't care how many times we have to squirt that stuff out on our hands. We'll drink it. We even considered filling the pool with it. And we'll do that if we get to minister to kids. And so then it made the summer much easier because whatever we had to do or felt we had to do, they were willing to go along.
Yeah, for us, I think the loudest cheer we heard from our summer staff. We made the call about 10 days in advance, and we have a Sunday meeting for us. So we did 2 weeks of work projects, and after that first week of work project, we said, okay, this next week will be work projects, but then after that, we're gonna have campers. And I remember Mike is behind the camera right now. I remember both of his arms went up. He was about to cry. Maybe not. But like you heard, just it's not that they hated work projects. This is like the first year that I can remember that near the end of the summer, I had counselors looking at me going, "Can we get back to work projects?" Yeah. It was one of those like, what do you? We need to do this every year, type of a thing. So they were so excited to be able to have campers because God had allowed us to be able to make that decision 10 days out, and it gave us a week to prep. That goes into kind of my next, probably a success and a failure. To plan a schedule of camp in a week is very hard. So we did 6 weeks of camp, and I think in those 6 weeks of camp, we had somewhere around 10 different schedules. And not a single one of those was the one I planned in the fall. And so it was my first time in the Rivertown program. And so I was like, oh, yay, I get to learn, Rivertown and teens this summer. And God put me through the ringer on learning the schedule. I know the schedule better than I would have ever known the schedule before. I've done 10 of them in 6 weeks of camp. So I know exactly how to manipulate my schedule to do a number of things. Things that we would have thought, we'll never do this. That's impossible. They're possible. So probably I would say a success as much as a failure. It kind of goes in both. Is knowing how to manipulate your schedule to provide fun and structure for both sponsors and kids. I can't imagine. I can't even remember what it was like. It's kind of like if you're married and have kids, what was it like to not have kids? It's like, I can't even remember. Like, what did we do in the evenings? You mean we were able to just say, let's go on a date night, and we just walked out we did that? Type of a thing. And that's kind of how I feel right now, because I know, I look at my schedule, and I've manipulated it so many times that I actually know when a pastor asks, can we do this? Yeah. We could do just about anything if you're the only one on property. We could change this thing. We could flip it on its head. We could do a number of things. So I'm very thankful for the first year. I wasn't thankful in summer. I will say that. But I'm very thankful now that my first year of running a teen program, to be able to sit back and go, I've got plenty of schedules and I know what I can and can't do. In the past, you would have gotten like a traditional answer. No, Craig, you can't do that. I didn't have to deal with any of those because COVID was an excuse. Like, no, I have to do this. So we broke through traditionalism this summer. The easy answer of like, no, nothing's been easy. When it comes to even the normal things, they weren't necessarily easy, but you could rely on them being normal. And so to actually I think we'll see just in the camping world as well as business, we've kind of let's break this rut that we're in because you've been forced to actually think outside the box. And I think it will benefit campers and churches to see a fresh look on camp because God has forced us to do something that we haven't had to do, and that is I have to actually rethink my whole program schedule. I have to rethink all my activities. And I'm excited to see the freshness. Next year's Tweakage, I think, will be lots of program ideas because you've had to rethink everything. And so that's been really exciting. So I don't know if you have anything on schedules that you guys have done, but I know I have a whole file folder in my on our database that's just schedules. And some of them have the same week number next to it. This is week 3. Oh, wait. That changed on Tuesday. This is week 3, Wednesday afternoon. Friday I had to write a new schedule because something changed. And so that was, it certainly was not exciting working the amount of hours and not staying in my office. As much as I love office work, staying in my office was not as enjoyable as it usually has been. But God certainly taught me how to manipulate a schedule to accomplish whatever goal was needed to accomplish. Steve, you have anything left?
Thinking about failures that turned out to be successes, and I heard a little bit of it yesterday. It seems to be almost universal. We all went into this COVID, first of all, thinking, okay, we got to shut down everything. This whole summer is going to be a loss. And so what we did with that is looked around at our facilities, and we got our property in 1990. Some of our buildings came a year or two later, but they went up and they've been there untouched since then. So starting to need some badly needed repairs as well as some other projects. And so we said, well, let's do a fundraiser just to do these several projects. And so we started that, and the response was amazing. One donor right away said, I'll double anything that comes in. And we ended up with almost 3 times as much as we set out to raise.
Amen.
So right now we're in great shape for projects that we're going to start next spring, because we're up in the mountains. Right now we're under feet and a lot of snow. You go in on snowmobile, you don't do any construction this time of year.
Yeah.
But it turned out great, and we had all of our, we had to tell all our staff, okay, we're not going to, you got to find something else to do, and a bunch of them said, there is nothing else to do. Everything's shut down, school's shut down. I want to be at camp no matter what. I'll do anything. I don't have to be a counselor. I'll come and pound nails. And so we had 10 or 11 staff people that came for the whole summer. And through the fundraiser, we were able to say, okay, if you come as a volunteer. We can't pay you this summer, but we will. Later on, we said, okay, we can pay your plane ticket. So we actually called a few people and got them there that were just sort of thinking of being there. We called it Redeeming the Time. And we got some great projects done, worked on some new stuff, and the staff all pitched together and just had a great time doing painting and staining. We completely remodeled our chapel inside. And then the great thing was that by July we could say, guess what? We're also going to do some camp, so have some campers here. So.
Oh yeah, you guys drove down the road, you saw all of those metal signs that were painted on what we did during COVID. Mike is behind the camera. He did 2 weeks of projects, so we had a smaller summer staff come, but we did project after project after project. Even to the point of even a success after that, we realized there's some things that we're behind on in what we would call longevity projects. We don't really want to pay for a new cabin, we just need to patch the roof a little bit, or stain or paint to make sure that the siding doesn't need to be replaced in 5 years. And so we've actually added a new summer staff position this summer as you're on the longevity work crew. Like you're going to go and you're going to stain and fix bathrooms and fix walls and paint and roof and do a number of things, because we realize, oh wow, we're pretty behind in this, and we need to protect what God's given us. We need to take care of that. And so I think we'll end up hiring 2-3 people that's all they do all summer is projects. And I think they'll enjoy it because they get to do a lot of different things. When they come back in 20 years, they're going to say, I did that, and I did that, and I did that, and that's no longer there, but I worked on that type of a thing. And so projects God provided a lot of money for us to be able to keep our hands busy. I think there was a time right when COVID happened that, you only could do construction. And so all of the resident staff we were doing projects. I could only be in my office like 4 hours. That's what Sam said. So I spent 4 hours a week planning summer, hoping that it would happen. And then I went and, re-roofed a really old building that had a whole ton of holes in it, mainly because we put sheetrock up and it rained, and that sheetrock came down accidentally. And so, we need to re-roof type of a thing. So. Lots of different projects that were able to happen here as successes and failures. We're gonna open it up for questions, comments. I think you had another one. We'll start with you.
Yeah. So this one's specifically for you, Willie. Is there anything that you felt the Wilds could have done to avoid what happened week 3, or?
In retrospect,
Okay.
you know, there are things that, so we didn't have a mask mandate until that week. So that was kind of something that we're just bringing in. We went and bought every gator mask that we could find off of Amazon and brought them in and gave them to the campers. They weren't used to wearing masks, so it was a very difficult thing. We kept it in front of them. We pushed it and pushed and pushed it, and they, you know, they weren't. They'd put them on and then they'd come down and they would leave them off, and so I don't know if there's anything that we would have changed at this point. Even at this point, looking back in retrospect, if we could have said no, it'd been more like they are in the airlines and get your face back. We could have done that, and I think they would have taken it to some extent. But I'm trying to put in perspective too. Yeah, in retrospect, I said, yeah, we made them all wear masks, but I can't. I don't. If we'd be living then what we know now, there's some things that we could have potentially, with knowledge, saying, we really need you to do this, but it was such a new, it was unprecedented, and we didn't realize it. So, I don't know that we could have changed anything that would have happened. No. So, and God protected us. I'm so thankful. You know, I'm looking on the local newspapers and everything. It's like, okay, this is gonna hit, and nothing to this day, nothing has been on there, and we had. We had 80% of our full-time staff get it, like that week, and so we all hunkered down again and got over it, and but God protected us even in all that, and I think that was part of you know, trying to be so careful going into it. So hopefully that answers. I don't know if it does.
Mariah?
I don't know if this is something we're going to cover in episode 13, the things we want to try and program. But with all the changes in schedules and programs and activities and things that could be hosted, looking at this upcoming year, we all are in hopes that overnight camp happens and we somehow go back to a semi-normal. But are there things that you're pursuing as a camp, like, hey, option B, option C? I know the Wilds New England decided to go to churches and kind of run some events that way. Are there things that you guys are like, let's have, you know, a round table just for a little bit and see what are things as a camp if we cannot do, being from Washington, Portland area, you know, hey, overnight camp for us, we're praying, but there's a very strong possibility that it's not even going to happen. So what do we do to help our churches and to help our pastors and communities that maybe is not on site, maybe it is on site, in a creative way to get people there? Are there things that any camps are working through right now in that aspect?
I like that Rand did that because my board thought that was a stupid idea, but when I said Rand Hummel made that idea, nothing that Rand says is stupid, so it was a better idea.
So Scott's board, I hope you're listening.
No, and there's another camp that was here that they went on site, but was it yours? Okay, yeah, they went on site and did some things at their churches and well, I don't know if it was you I talked to, but they were nervous how the financial thing would come out because they didn't try to make the churches pay for the meals and whatever, but they said almost without fail they took care of all the expenses and even gave a love gift to help out with the staff they brought. So, and I think our churches were very open to help because they understood nobody trained us for this. Nobody trained the pastors. I mean, if you told us in Bible college that we would voluntarily shut churches down for 2 to 3 to 4 to what, here in California, 24 months? I don't know. But we would have told you there is no way we'd let the devil shut us down like that. And yet it seemed like we voluntarily did it fairly quickly. And that, looking back, I'm not even sure if that was always wise. But I grew up in Indiana and they didn't have to do that as long. In fact, when we wanted to go out to eat, we went to Indiana. It's only half a mile away. We went across the state line and ate.
I think as far as what you're saying, because we did the same thing with taking camp on the road, and I appreciate what Matt Wilson said earlier, staying on mission. And we're stepping back and we're thinking, you know, you're getting all these texts and we all got them, Facebook messages, kids, how disappointed they were that they're not going to be able to go, because they thought they were. And in tears, you're like, okay. we got to do something about this. And the thought did come up. We don't have camp. Can we do this? And in reality, we're like, we have to do this. We have to get out there, and we don't want to stay with day camp on wheels or whatever. But and so yeah, we might borrow that if we get another pandemic. But having those day camps out there was added to what New England did. North Carolina, the 3 groups we sent out, we hit about 36 churches that got shut out of camp. And our intent was to go to the churches that got shut out. And we were able to minister in that way. And we were able to stay on mission because of that. We're serving the churches. So if you do get shut down, I encourage you to try to handle it in that way.
Do you guys have, on that path, anybody who did mobile, what were things that you found, yes, in the trailer, no, it's a waste of space, that on site is great, but, so just more as if anybody has thoughts or suggestions on that, we'd be really interested.
Our intent was to throw everything that we could into a van and go. Of course, we all had COVID, so we all threw in it, and we had to lick the windows if we wanted to. But we threw as much into the vehicle as we possibly could, and to the point of we took Cool Beans, our coffee shop, and cold drinks and stuff like that as we could. We took our laser tag equipment. We did that, of course. I threw a couple big balls in there and everything like that. So you go out and as much as possible, our God and I time, we created a day schedule that looked as similar to camp on their property as we could, and it just gave them a semblance. We took our skit time, fun time, and we did full fun times on the road, and we just tried to make it look as much like camp as possible. And the kids walking away was like, that wasn't camp, but thank you, that was good. Mm-hmm. And so it was, so anything you can.
Anybody in the room did mobile camp? Well, list your, Micah might get it on the video, so if somebody's watching the video, they might look you up to ask you questions. So
what camp?
What camp?
Venture Faith Camp out of Georgia, South Georgia. And we went and we have some inflatables, and so we took those. We would wipe down everything almost every time a kid would go through, unless they were the same family. We're blessed. We have a lot of puppeteers and ventriloquists that were able to go with us on that, and so that helped. That, and it actually helped in a couple relationships that we would not have been able to have at camp. One kid was too young to come to camp, but she wound up getting saved. And like every week, the grandmother sends, here's her getting baptized, here's the story you told. We do a mission story every week where we do a tall card and different things where it goes through. So we try to make it as much like camp. We made some on-the-go putt-putt courses that just stacked in, and the kids absolutely loved it. That was one of those where I'm just like handing out the things, and my wife is like, you have to wipe down those every time. I'm like, these are kids. And, you have to take a little bit. So there was a couple things where, having a couple of different, especially my wife being a school teacher, has a different mindset of the kids' view than I do as a camp director. Like, let's just put them all in and play. But no, you have to do these, take these precautions, and that kind of helped out quite a bit.
And Matt, did you do it this summer or not yet? No. I know that Scott Schulman at Camp Grace traveled around to churches. Anybody else?
The Edge Camp did it, and they're going to keep it. Yeah. So I would definitely contact them.
Yeah, Matt.
Just something to throw out there, because when we first started our ministry, it was called Camp on Wheels. And our philosophy statement for it was that with the right philosophy and the right people, you can do camp in a parking lot. And it's true. So I think it was cool to see that get restarted with a lot of camps doing that. And I do think it's something that we could continue during, post-COVID as a way to keep serving churches outside of the summer season.
As far as Ironwood goes, I don't think we'll do mobile camp. We have kind of a philosophy of ours is building projects are investing in campers, and so if we're able to build when God has God's allowed this to happen for a reason. So for some of us, we believe God has allowed that to happen so that we could then adjust and do mobile camp and go and visit the churches on property. And then if you have projects, like I think Dean Loftus, we don't have campers, but I have summer staff, and I'm able to, take a big chunk out of this building project time because God, in essence, said this is important. Focus on this. And so if there's projects, we're gonna do the projects, and maybe churches can come up and do missions trips up here to help us with projects, because construction, apparently you don't have to socially distance or anything like that. So a variety of things. I don't think we had flirted with the idea of doing like a day camp here or there, but when we were going to work through that, we decided we were just going to run camp. So I don't know if we would do more mobile, but possibly. So
Utah's opening up now, so we're planning to go full speed ahead this summer. Hope nothing shuts back down.
yes.
I don't see it shutting down. I'm not sure people would take it again to that extent.
Yeah.
And
There's no
at least in the Midwest, I don't know about everybody else, but they've had
Yeah,
enough
so
of it.
our plan B is projects. Like, we don't have a plan B of putting anything on, well, not putting anything on wheels. We probably would put some wheels on something, but we wouldn't travel around to camp. We would adjust what we would do here.
And did any camps do camp in a box?
Thought about it, but no.
Just not as effective.
Yeah.
Just curious.
One thing we did do, we cut our week short by meal. We normally have a closing meal and invite the parents and the pastors to come in and eat with their camper, have a closing service, and do the shtick at the end, to build up which team won and all that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want all those parents in with all the staff and whatever. And so we do that final service in hopes that an unsaved parent will come and hear the gospel and be saved. Hadn't happened in 15 or 20 years that we've been doing that. This year we didn't get to have that. We closed down at 4 o'clock, and one of our executive board members told us about the little girl that had come with her friend, went home, and her dad took her out for supper, and she actually told him about how she had gotten saved that week, and Dad, and you need to get saved, and he called the pastor and he got saved. So, God doesn't need our plan to get people saved. And so that was my final point, is that God is in control even in this.
All time.
So best laid plan, sometimes that's not what he needs.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I think they're hungry.
Possibly. They're still going to have to wait a little bit. But there's a lot to be thankful for in blessings. I think we are able to be thankful for in a number of things, even in these hardships. But it's our job to take a look and say, what did we do well? Is this something that becomes normalcy for us? Or is this something like, I don't ever want to do it again, but it did work, and we'll put it down in our history. So in 15 years, when you get some new guy or new girl that comes through and says, have you ever? You're like, yeah, we did in 2020. And you're able to have a history of all of the flexibility you've been able to learn on how to do camp. Thanks for joining us. I think dinner or lunch is in 10 minutes. So
One other thing we had to do, our annual project 5K raises about $8,000 or $9,000. It had to go totally virtual. Thankfully, we'd had the virtual option the year before. We actually had more runners virtually than we've ever had before. And since nobody was coming on the campgrounds to run it, I decided I could run the course and I could win because I'd have no competition. And my daughter did the video for us because I came in second to our maintenance guy's beautifully cute 4-year-old who crossed the finish line ahead of me. And for the first time ever, we had like 1,000 views in 72 hours for our little camp. That was really something.